A man's skeleton slowly dissolved while he was still alive. People in Kazakhstan randomly fell into comas for nearly a week, and patients watched as colored fibers grew out of wounds doctors insisted were imaginary. These are human medical anomalies that scientists still can't explain. In the 1920s, a sea captain named Charles Martel started shrinking, and not in the natural way you shrink as you get older. This was way more extreme. He was losing inches of height every year, an incel's worst nightmare. His bones were getting so soft they couldn't hold him up anymore. By the time he got to doctors at Massachusetts General Hospital, he'd lost nearly a foot of height, and his chest had warped into this wide barrel shape because his ribs just couldn't keep their form. What was happening was his parathyroid gland had gone haywire. That gland controls calcium levels, and when it malfunctions, it starts pulling calcium straight out of your bones and dumping it into the blood. So his skeleton was basically dissolving from the inside. His bones were bending like rubber. Even after doctors worked out what was going on, it still took 7 separate surgeries to find the tiny tumor causing it. It was one small gland misfiring. That's it. One signal goes wrong and you start turning into a hobbit. Your body can be an incredibly scary place to be. Imagine feeling something crawling under your skin, looking down and seeing tiny colored threads, red, blue, black, poking out of open sores on your body. That's what people with Morgellons disease deal with every day. Now, when I mention multicolored fibers, it sounds a lot nicer looking than it is. I wouldn't head to Google Images if I were you, but it is your life. The fibers grow right out of the skin, out of wounds that just won't seem to heal. For a long time, doctors wrote this off as a mental health issue, telling patients they were imagining or picking at themselves without realizing. That's particularly a rough position to be in. I mean, you're already dealing with something so distressing, and then people that you go to for help just tell you it's all in your head. But researchers at Oklahoma State University actually put the fibers under powerful microscopes, and what they found was strange. They were made of keratin and collagen, proteins the human body makes itself. Some scientists think it ties back to the same bacteria that causes Lyme disease. The idea is that it hijacks the body's normal process for building hair and skin, and instead of producing normal tissue, the body starts making these weird fibers. Nobody's fully figured it out yet, but the disease is real. That much has been proven. In 2016, American embassy staff in Cuba started hearing a strange piercing sound. Shortly after, they started getting bad headaches, dizziness, and cognitive issues that looked exactly like traumatic brain injuries, even though none of them had been in any kind of accident. This got called Havana syndrome, and the damage was real. Brain scans showed actual visible changes in the white matter, which is the part of the brain that handles communication between different regions. One theory is that some kind of directed radio frequency energy was used on them, which is a very unsettling idea that someone could remotely scramble your brain. Investigations have gone back and forth and never fully settled on a cause, but early brain scans did show visible damage. There's a small village in Kazakhstan where for several years, starting in 2013, people would just fall asleep in the middle of whatever they were doing. Walking, eating, mid-conversation, they drop into something like a coma and stay that way for up to 6 days. When they woke up, they had memory loss and really intense hallucinations. Even cats were stumbling around in circles before passing out. The village sat right next to an old abandoned Soviet uranium mine, so people assumed some kind of gas was leaking, or radon, carbon monoxide, something like that. Reasonable assumption, but when they tested the air, the levels weren't anywhere near high enough to explain people being out cold for nearly a week at a time. The best guess right now is that specific weather patterns were trapping gases at ground level, but what exactly triggered it, why it hit so many people in that same time, and why it eventually just stopped, none of that is a clean answer. The villagers eventually had to be relocated, which is a pretty grim outcome for something nobody could even fully explain. I mean, just pack up and leave. We're not sure what's going on here. Someone has a stroke or hits their head, they wake up, and they can still speak their own language perfectly fine, except now they sound like they're from a completely different country. That sounds ridiculous, but this has actually been known to happen. It's called foreign accent syndrome. It happens because the injury hits the part of the brain that controls the timing and rhythm of speech. So instead of coming out garbled, the words come out in a pattern that sounds like a specific foreign accent. Doctors can see the damage on an MRI. What they can't explain is why the brain lands on something more recognizable, a real accent from a real place, rather than just making speech sound scrambled and unclear. There's something almost nice and poetic about it, even if it must be deeply disorienting to live through. But your brain gets damaged, loses something, and then somehow fills the gap with a speech pattern you never actually grew up with. Plenty of accents I can think of that I'd want to have, also plenty I probably wouldn't want to have. Aquagenic urticaria is an allergy to water. When people with this condition get water on their skin, any temperature by the way, from a shower, rain, or just washing their hands, they break out in painful burning hives. The obvious question is why their own bodily fluids don't set it off constantly. The reaction seems to be specific to water hitting the outer surface of the skin. One theory is that water dissolves certain proteins on their skin and creates something the immune system treats as a threat. Unfortunately, there's no cure and no complete explanation for how a body that's mostly made of water can be allergic to it. It really makes you realize how much of daily life we take completely for granted. A glass of water, a quick shower. It is super rare, but some people don't even have those luxuries. Most people can barely remember what they had for lunch a few days ago. People with hyperthymesia, highly superior autobiographical memory, can tell you exactly what they had for lunch 20 years ago. What the weather was like, what they were wearing, what was on the news. Give them a date and they can replay the whole day in their head like a recording. And they're not making it up. Brain scans show the memory regions in their brains are noticeably larger than in most people. It's not just incredible how much memory their brains can store though, it's that they aren't overwhelmed by it all. Our brains constantly trim useless information to make room for what matters, for lack of a better word, but these people skip that process entirely and yet they still function completely normally day to day. FOP stands for fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva. It's a condition where the body can't tell the difference between muscle and bone. Normally when you bruise yourself or you get cut, your body heals it with soft tissue, but in someone with FOP, it sends bone building signals instead. So the muscles, tendons, and ligaments start slowly turning into solid bone. Over time, a second skeleton kind of begins forming on top of the first one, and as it grows, it locks the joints in place. The person gradually gets encased in this armor of bone that their own body created. Scientists know exactly which gene causes it, but they can't stop it. Because if a surgeon tries to remove the extra bone, the body just reads the surgery as a fresh injury and grows even more bone on that site. So it's this awful loop. The more you try to help, the worse it gets. There are only a few hundred known cases in the world, which makes research incredibly difficult too. For generations, a family living in the remote hills of Kentucky had blue skin. They weren't sick or anything, they were just blue. This is a real condition called this. It affects how blood carries oxygen, so instead of the usual bright red, the blood turns a dark brownish color. Through the skin, that looks blue or purple. The reason it stayed in this family for so long came down to how isolated they were. They lived far enough out that they mostly married within a small local group, so the gene just kept passing straight down without outside DNA ever diluting it. Generation after generation, just blue. Dabu dee, dabu die. I can't say that without hearing that tune in my head. Anyway, this final patient is only known to the public as SM. She's an American woman born in 1965 with a very interesting ailment. She's physically incapable of feeling fear. You could put a snake in her lap, walk her through a haunted house, put her in a genuinely dangerous situation, and her heart rate will not go up. A rare condition caused her amygdala, which is basically the brain's alarm system, to harden into calcium and essentially stop working. She's not emotionless though. Everything else is completely normal. She feels happy, sad, frustrated. She just doesn't get scared, and that's pretty fascinating because fear is like the most basic, primitive, hardwired thing we have. It's what's kept humans alive long enough to become what we are today. But SM has ended up in genuinely dangerous situations and come out through them fine, just using logic to figure out what to do rather than gut panic. And she seems to live a pretty normal life. She's married, has kids. The assumption's always been that without fear, you almost can't function properly. It's just so tied in with our survival, but This woman is proof that maybe we rely on it more out of habit than necessity. That's been the video for today. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next one.